There is a moment you know exactly which one when you realize that you've done. Not just a small oversight, not a minor slip, a real mistake, the kind that changes something. And in that moment, before the world even reacts, your own mind becomes your worst enemy. This video is about what happened next, not the apology, not the excuse, what actually happens inside you and what the people who truly recover do differently from those who never fully come back from it. By the time this ends, you will understand something about yourself that most people spend years trying to figure out. And you'll carry a tool that works even when everything around you feels like it's falling apart. But first, you need to understand why most recoveries fail before they even begin. Because here is the truth nobody tells you. The mistake itself rarely destroys people. What destroys them is the story they start telling themselves the moment after it happens. And this is the real truth. Shame is the emotion underneath every serious mistake. Not guilt, shame. Guilt says I did something bad. Shame says I am something bad. That distinction sounds small, but it is the difference between someone who rebuilds and someone who collapses. The moment you cross from guilt into shame, you stop solving a problem and start becoming one. And shame is patient. It will wait for you in the morning, in the silence, in the middle of a conversation that has nothing to do with what happened. Most people, when they make a serious mistake, do one of two things. They either minimize it, they talk themselves into believing it wasn't that big a deal, or they catastrophize it, convincing themselves that everything is now permanently ruined. Both responses look completely different on the outside, but they come from the exact same place. The inability to sit with the full weight of what happened without letting it define you entirely. And that inability is where the real work begins. It's in that point where this begins. Think about the people who you admire most, not for their success, but for their resilience. What you will find, almost without exception, is not that they avoided serious mistakes. It is that they developed a very specific relationship with failure. They treated it not as a verdict, but as data, not as an ending, but as information about where the gap was between who they were and who they needed to become. That reframe is not a motivational trick. It is a survival mechanism. Because here's what nobody warns you about after a serious mistake. The people around you will move on faster than you will. The world will stop paying attention before you stop punishing yourself. And if you haven't built that internal relationship with failure, you will spend months recovering from something the world already forgot. Not because the mistake wasn't real, but because your inner dialogue kept it alive long after it needed to die. So what exactly does a real recovery look like? And why do some people come back stronger while others carry the weight of one mistake for the rest of their lives? The first thing that separates those who recover from those who don't is radically honesty. Not performed honesty, not the kind of you display in public to show remorse, but the private one. Uncomfortable kind where you stop negotiating with what actually happened. You look at it directly. You name it precisely. Not, I made an error in judgment, but I was afraid and I chose what was uncomfortable over what was right. Or whatever your specific truth is, the vague version of accountability is just another way of hiding. The second thing is what we might call forward accountability. Most people understand accountability as looking backward, explaining what went wrong, acknowledging the damage. But real recovery demands that you also account for what comes next, that you make a commitment, not to perfection, but to direction. The people who never recover are often the ones who become so consumed by explaining the past that they forget to build the future. And the third thing, this is the one most people skip, is rebuilding trust with yourself before you try to rebuild it with anyone else. Because here is the part of recovery that nobody talks about openly. After a serious mistake, you don't just lose the truth of others, you lose the trust of yourself. You start second guessing your instincts. You hesitate where you used to move with confidence. You question your own judgment in moments where you need clarity most. That internal fracture, if it goes unaddressed, will follow you into every room you walk into, every decision you face, every relationship you try to repair. And you will wonder why things feel slightly off even after the external consequences have passed. Rebuilding self-trust is not dramatic. It doesn't require a grand gesture or a life overhaul. It requires something much simpler and much harder. Small, consistent actions that prove to yourself through evidence and not words that you can be relied upon again. One kept promise, one honest conversation you didn't avoid, one moment where fear told you to run and you stayed. It's in that moment that you do not recover from a serious mistake by escaping it. You recover by walking through it slowly enough that you understand every part of it, what it caused, what it revealed, and what it is asking you to become. The people who come out of failure with more depth, more clarity, and more strength than before are not special. They are not unusually resilient by nature. They simply refuse to let the story end with the fall. The loop we open at the beginning, the question of what the people who truly recovered do differently, comes down to this. They let the mistake matter without letting it last forever. They hold it long enough to learn from it, and then they put it down. Not because they've forgotten it, but because they absorb everything it had to teach. The mistake doesn't get to write to the rest of your story. Only you do. Start there.